Back in 2017, the Houston Astros won the World Series, which I know for some here was a cause of much rejoicing, and for Rangers fans, not so much. But it came out in just this past January that the Astros cheated on their way to the World Series. They used a camera and I believe it was a garbage can lid, so high and low technology, to steal signs and relay those signs to the batter. Well, it has come out, or at least it is rumored, that the 2018 Red Sox, who won the World Series in 2018, cheated in some way as well. What happens when there's a scandal like this? What happens when someone is caught cheating? Well, I mean, you just look in the baseball world. You have 3 managers and 1 general manager who were either still on the team or were part of that team, have lost their jobs. You have players publicly saying they need to be pitched at. The Astros hitters need to be pitched at. And among fans, what happens? We suddenly start wondering about who else is cheating. What else might be going on? Can we trust the game of baseball to be played fairly? It becomes a question of trust. And not only that, it turns a shiny championship ring into something duller and grayer. Trust, I think it's fair to say, has been under attack all over the place. You can see it in baseball. You can see it in other sports. You can see it in the medical field, all the concerns about coronavirus and is the response appropriate or not. You can see it in government. I mean, look no farther than the 2 political parties. You have President Trump has repeatedly said that Democrats are either lying, cheating, dumb, or all 3. President Trump himself was impeached under an accusation of cheating. Trust is so hard to come by. Trust in schools, trust in organizations. And that can spill over into the spiritual realm. And one of the movements of the past decade or two has been a move of people from the established denominations to, what are these? They're called megachurches. Churches built around a person rather than an organization. And you see a lot of people who have lost their trust in God, lost their faith in God, and have no anchor to trust in. They're left with hoping that they can find somebody that they think is trustworthy. And I'll tell you, because this has happened to me, it's easy for that lack of trust in your boss, lack of trust in your company, lack of trust in your school, lack of trust in your neighbors, people around you, to spill into the church. To where we start wondering, well, is anybody here really trustworthy? Because everybody outside seems like they're not. And that lack of trust in God that we see all around us can infect us as well. So what I want to do this morning is talk about trust and talk about how we get it back and where we should put it and how we should put it there. Now we're going to look at 2 very familiar passages. Let me get that off. 2 very familiar passages. A lot of you probably guessed at least one of them. We're going to look at a couple of passages that most of you are familiar with. And then I'm going to throw a twist at you. A scriptural twist, don't worry about that, but a twist to the kind of the common idea we get from these passages. So if you would get out your Bibles and turn to Proverbs chapter 3. If you're wondering, that first slide was the only fancy one I have. From now on, I'm going to be more Ricky than Jordan. So, got a thumbs up from Ricky. So, I'll put some of this on the screen as we go, but let's read it through first. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in Jehovah with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. So let's take these phrases one at a time. Trust in Jehovah with all your heart. I don't know about you, but to me this reads more like a goal than a means of getting there. A goal that, I think we all acknowledge. Trust in God. Yes, okay. But how do we get there? I mean, is it just a trust where you say, okay, God, I trust you, and then you go on doing whatever you were doing? No. We get the first hint of it here when it says, trust in Jehovah with all your heart. Again, that's more of a goal than how you get there. How do you give all of your heart's trust to God? Well, we're going to see some of that as we go along. Trust in Jehovah with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So here is the first real how. First real how. Lean not on your own understanding. Now this works great as a visual, so if you're listening to this in audio, I'm sorry. But we like, especially in America, where we're taught rugged individualism and to have self-esteem and your self-confidence in yourself, we are taught to lean on our own understanding. Taught that, and it's more insidious than that nowadays. Not only are we taught to lean on our own understanding, we're taught that whatever you feel is fine. Whatever your understanding of the situation is, that's your understanding. We may disagree, but you can stay with what you have, be it right or wrong. So we are called here to not lean on our own understanding, and I think you can imply lean on God's understanding because it's paired with trust in Jehovah with all your heart. Lean not on what you understand, on what you believe, on what just comes into your head. Lean on His understanding. And why? Well, because His understanding is complete, is infinite. His understanding transcends anything that can come into our puny brains. And may I say something here? Which, by the way, if you're not aware, when a preacher says, may I say something here, he's not asking for permission. He's going to say something, he's just warning you that it might be a bit controversial. So, may I say something here? It's easy to fall into this, I know, because I fall into it too, where my think-sos become more important. So let me give you a couple of examples. An easy one is, fortunately we've got our carpet sitting here and it's been blue for many years, but one of the things that happens when you build a new building is people come up and say, I think that the carpet should be this color, the wall should be this color, or this room should be shaped this way, or I want there to be, I was about to say bigger women's restroom, but that's needed, and has been taken care of, thankfully. But I have these things that I want to happen. Well, when you're saying, I want such and such, you're betraying, I think it's fair to say, that this is my understanding. And the more you say, I want this, the more you're leaning on saying, what I understand, what I think, what I feel is what's most important. Another example, maybe hits a little closer to home. The past few years, we've been learning a lot of new songs. And I'll tell you, I think I'm not alone in this, that there are some of the new songs that are suddenly become my favorites because they are that good. There's some that are kind of, okay, I might lead it, I might not, just depends. And there's some that are just, I see it and I go, oh, that one again. Maybe you've done that. The fact that I like a song or not, as far as just if I like, the word choices or I like the the melody, or I like how complicated it is or uncomplicated it is my understanding of the song. Now, let me put a big caveat there. If there is a problem with the song that the message is not right or it violates Scripture, and there's songs that have done that we've taken out, that's not my understanding anymore. I'm linking it to God's understanding now and taking myself, hopefully, out of the equation. But if it's just, I just don't like that song, well, that's my understanding. That's, somebody else is going to like it a lot more than me. A song leader probably likes it a lot more than me, otherwise he wouldn't be leading it. But that's my understanding, and I need to see the limits of my understanding. So, soapbox moment over. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. There's that pesky word, all, again. In all your ways, with all your heart. This idea of leaving nothing out. It's not, I'm going along during my day and, hi, nothing silly like that. It's acknowledging God's control over my life. It's acknowledging His guidance in my ways, guidance as to where I'm going, acknowledging Him wherever I go, acknowledging His superior understanding, His superior knowledge of what's going to happen and how I need to be prepared for it. Acknowledge Him. And then it says He will direct your paths. And these two, once again, go together. God will direct our paths. Your version might say steps. Or I think another version says, make your paths straight. He will take your paths and guide them if you acknowledge Him. If you're willing to be led, if you're willing to trust enough to say, I'm not sure exactly where I'm going, I have an idea, but I'm going to trust in God to lead my steps, then He has promised to lead us. This is the first of 3 promises we're going to see regarding trust. So trust in God with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in everything you do, and He will direct your paths. Next, the other passage we're going to look at is 1 Peter 5. Another passage that's familiar to most of us here. 1 Peter 5, we're going to read verses 6 and 7. 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time, casting all your anxiety upon Him, because He cares for you. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. Again, kind of again one of these goals, more so than here's how you get there, at least in my thinking. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. This is not something that happens overnight. This is not something that happens consistently unless you really work at it. It's something we'll all be working at until the day before we appear before Him, and then when everybody is going to be humble, whether they were in life or not. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. Being humble enough to trust that He can direct our steps, that He understands where we're going and how we need to get there. Humbling ourselves because we see His much greater knowledge, we talked about, His understanding that's much greater than ours. Humbling ourselves because we see who God is and who we are in relation to Him, that the only reason we can be with Him is because of the blood of Jesus. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time. This is the second of the promises we're going to see. You notice the way it said He may exalt you in due time. There's certainly a movement to, if you acknowledge God and you look to God, you're going to get something now. You're going to be exalted now. Well, that's not what this passage says. It may, there may be things that happen in this life, but to me, this is looking towards eternity. It's more than anything. I mean, it's certainly bigger than anything that might happen to us in this life. So this humbling that we're supposed to do, this trusting that comes out of this humility, is with an eye to the future. An eye towards, I am humble now because of who I am compared to God and because of everything that I've done wrong, because of my limited understanding. And looking to a day when not I'm going to exalt myself, but God Himself is going to exalt me. I mean, there is some of that here, when we are made sons of God through belief and obedience, we are exalted in that way. But to be exalted, to be in God's presence, to see what Moses wasn't able to see, the face of God, to be exalted in His presence, to be humble because we know where we are, and when we are exalted, we will still know that we didn't deserve any of it. Humble yourselves that He may exalt you in due time, casting all your anxiety on Him. Some versions will say cares on Him. This one, of any of this, is probably the hardest for me. And I can say this because Mike has said this in class a couple times. Mike Ryan has, that it's hard for him too. It's hard for a lot of us to cast our anxiety on Him. And again, there's that word all. Cast all your anxiety on Him, leaving nothing out. And that, for me at least, is difficult because I like to hold on to them. And I like to worry. Well, I don't like to worry about things. I do worry about things. But He says, cast them on Him. Cast them all on Him. Well, and why is that? Because His understanding, what we've already talked about, His understanding is greater. His power is greater. He is going to direct our paths if we are humble before Him. He's going to exalt us and give us something far better than what we have here if we're faithful. And more than that, He cares. We're not just casting off our anxiety to say, I just don't want this anymore. We're casting it to God, who is telling us here, not only do I know you get anxious about things, He's saying, I want that anxiety. I want you to give me what's troubling you. I want to help you because I care for you. The God of heaven cares enough about us that He will take those anxieties. And more than that, we can be anxious and not just turn our heads gray. God, on the other hand, can do something about it. Can do more than far more than anything we can do for ourselves. He wants that anxiety. He wants us to give it to Him because He cares. Which, I don't know, if anything's going to make you humble, wouldn't it be that? God of heaven says, I want your anxieties. I don't want you to worry. Not just saying just don't worry. Not only don't worry, but give me the worry. I'll take care of it. I'll help you get through it. I will direct your steps. That makes you humble, that God thinks that much of you and me. So what do we have so far? I've kind of split it. It won't be on the screen, but I've kind of split it into the what, the how, and the why. So what are we to do? Trust in Jehovah with all your heart. Leave nothing back. And humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. Trust and be humble. And the two, as I hope we've seen, go together. How do we do that? First, we lean not on our own understanding. We lean on His far better understanding of this world. In all our ways, acknowledge Him. Look to Him in all that we do. Look to Him to guide our steps. And cast all our anxiety on Him. Give him everything that worries us. As hard as that may be sometimes, give him everything that worries about us. And the why? God will direct our steps. He will show us the way we need to go, and he will help us get there. That he may exalt you in due time, which, again, looks, I think, to our eternal reward. That God has planned to exalt us. He is waiting to exalt us. He's waiting to bring us to him. And that should give us confidence. And that he cares. That he wants our anxieties. He wants us to trust him. And he will show us. And that he has in the past shown himself worthy of that trust. And he will show us today that he is worthy of our trust. All right. Pretty typical sermon so far. Now, let's throw in the twist. As Ricky, in his many years here, might tell us at this point, the first verse, or 1 Peter 5 and verse 6 starts, humble yourselves therefore. Well, what is the therefore? For that, we're going to have to back up a verse. Oops. So let's read verse 5. 1 Peter 5 and verse 5. Likewise, you younger, be subject to the elder. Yes, all of you gird yourselves with humility to serve one another, for God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I'm going to take the second half of that verse first. Yes, all of you gird yourselves with humility. And I like how the old ASV puts it, gird. It reminds me of when Jesus went to wash the disciples' feet, how he took off his outer garments and put on a towel, that there was preparation involved. And when we talked about being humble before God, how that takes effort and work, doesn't it really take effort and work to be humble to other people who aren't infinite and all-knowing? So gird yourselves with humility. Build yourselves up. Being humble takes preparation, especially when we're talking about other people. Preparing ourselves with an attitude to be humble. Preparing ourselves with an attitude of sacrifice, that we're willing to give of ourselves for other people. And preparing our minds and our hearts so that we're willing to be humble, willing to put ourselves beneath other people, to be humble before other people, to serve one another, to be ready to serve and to go out and do it, to be humble before each other, which again, we've linked humility with trust. Part of being humble and saying, you know what, we're going to do what you want to do instead of what I want to do. Part of that is trust, to say, you know what, you have this idea, we're going to go with that. I trust you that this idea is going to work, or if it doesn't work, that we can do something else. Trust each other enough to be humble and to give them preference. And it says, right before our verse 6, for God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. I think it's saying here that this is not optional. That if we're proud in our ways and our thinking and how we look at each other, God's not going to be with us in that. In fact, he's going to push against us. But if we're humble, he will give us grace. Now let's hit the first part of this verse. Now, depending on your translation, I think the New King James says, be subject to your elders. I believe the ESV says the elders, plural. The old ASV just says be subject to the elder. A lot of what I'm going to say could apply equally well if we're just talking about people who are older or about our elders here. It works either way. But my opinion, and I've set myself up for you to ignore my opinion because I said lean not on your own understanding, but it sure seems to me that since this is following verses 1 through 4, that it's talking about elders and how they are to shepherd the flock, and some commands for elders, that this is the likewise links the two to them. So I'm going to talk about this with respect to the 7 men who serve us. Something that happens, and maybe it just happens to me, I don't know, but something that can happen when you start thinking about your elders is that somehow they become like a different class of people somehow, where the normal rules of how you interact with people just kind of go out the window. What I mean by that is seems like it's been in the case in my life that it's a lot easier to be critical of an elder than it is of somebody else, at least in your mind. Maybe because we have high expectations, which we should, of our elders. But somehow that it's okay to talk about an elder and talk about an elder to other people to say, I can't believe they did this. What were they thinking? What's going on here? I mean, I've heard conspiracy theories that I think every one of them has been untrue. This idea of, they must be doing something against me. Well, you know what? You just leaned on your own understanding again when you do that, when we do that. But when it says in the second half of this verse, yes, all of you gird yourselves with humility to serve one another. I don't see anybody left out of that. Yes, all of you gird yourselves with humility. Of course, that includes elders towards us. See the first 4 verses of this chapter. But girding myself with humility for my elders, to serve one another. I don't see anybody left out of who I serve. I think our 7 elders will tell you that, I know they will tell you that they need help sometimes too. They need someone to serve them, whether it's pat on the back or we're praying for you, we're thinking about you. You made this decision and that was absolutely the right decision. Thank you for your kind consideration. Thank you for all you do that we never see in guiding this flock. For whatever reason, it takes some effort, at least for me, because I've said some things to the elders before that I very much regret now. That it takes preparation to serve anybody. And when we're preparing to serve other people, it goes for all people. The elders get all of the terrible things that happen in our lives, the rough patches we all go through. They need our service. They need our humility in listening to them and submitting to them. They need us to serve them just as much as we need them to serve us. And as we've linked humility and trust, they need us to trust them. There have been times when I've looked at something with my very incomplete knowledge of what's going on, and I haven't trusted the elders, and I'm ashamed to say that because I should have. Not that they're perfect, but that they deserve that trust because of who they are, because of what they're trying to do, because of the men that they are, the wives they have standing beside them. And just to get a little more specific, when we see something that we're not sure about, something that seems wrong to us, the thing to do is not to go call up your 5 friends and say, hey, what was going on here? Go talk to them. I wish I did that more especially when I was younger. Talk to them. Don't be afraid of them. They'll be happy. They sit down with people day in and day out with issues, and they're happy to explain everything they can explain. Talk to them. Trust them enough to go to them when there's an issue, because they deserve that trust. God has placed that burden on them, and that the burden of watching for our souls. So let's let them do that. Trust, as we said at the beginning, is a rare commodity these days. And it's up to us to recognize that we need to trust our God in everything, and that we need to trust our fellow Christians. Sometimes, are they not worthy of that trust? Sure. But be willing to sacrifice ourselves, to be humble enough to say, I trust you. I'll let you take care of this. And that trust and that humility that goes along with it is the key. Is the key to our salvation, is the key to becoming what God wants us to be. For He, what does it say about Jesus in Philippians 2? That He came to this earth and being formed, He came as a servant and being found in form as a man, not a servant. He humbled Himself, becoming obedient even to the death on the cross. God was humble enough to give Himself, to give His Son to die for us. That's certainly something we can do for Him. Thank you so much for listening this morning. We're going to have a closing prayer and then a final song and then be dismissed to our classes. Thank you.